At 2:30 a.m., a battleship dead for 42 years sent a signal. The command room froze. One green light blinked on the old board. Beside it was a forgotten name, Mercy Forge. Commander Jonah Ward stared at it as if the ship had spoken. He was 72, with scarred hands, tired knees, and the careful walk of a man who had lived too long on steel decks. Once, he commanded living ships. Now he guarded dead ones. Harrow 7 was a gray moon at the edge of human space. No city stood there. No families slept under colony domes. Its only purpose was to hold humanity's retired battleships. Hundreds rested across the craters. Each hull had a story. Jonah knew which ships had burned above Mars, which had limped home from Orion Station, and which had gone silent while protecting ships filled with unarmed families. Young officers called Harrow 7 a scrapyard. Jonah called it a cemetery. Then the warning grid died. Signal Officer Kessa Rourke bent over her console. Commander, movement in low orbit. The main screen cleared. Black alien ships slid around the far side of the moon. Their engines burned dull red. Their hulls were narrow and sharp, drifting between dead human vessels, using old armor as cover. Bram stopped when he saw the screen. The Draal. That name changed the room. The Draal did not send fleets to empty places. If they had come to Harrow 7, they wanted the corridor behind it, the route toward 3 colony worlds. Kessa's voice tightened. They are hiding between our old ships. Jonah watched the enemy flagship drift past Mercy Forge. They are walking through a room without knowing who is buried there. At the center of the formation, the Draal command ship turned toward the station. Its forward guns opened. Kessa whispered, "Sir, we do not have an active fleet." Jonah pulled out a scratched steel key. For 42 years, no commander had used it. He placed it in the red panel, Graveyard Defense Last Authority. Then he looked at the silent ships beneath the stars. At 2:30 a.m., Jonah said, "The dead do not sleep." He turned the key. Deep under the moon dust, buried cables began to hum. Somewhere in the dark, one ancient cannon lifted its head. The Draal commander was named Sarek. He did not shout. He spoke softly, and every officer near him moved fast. From the bridge of the Ashkarad, Sarek studied Harrow 7. Human warships covered the moon below him. Their engines were frozen. Their turrets pointed into dust. His officers saw dead metal. Sarek saw cover. "Defense status," he said. A lower officer named Rill answered. "One station. No active surface fleet. Trace power only." Sarek looked at the ancient hulls. "Move through the graveyard." The plan was simple. The Draal fleet would slip between the retired ships, hide from distant scanners, destroy the watch station, and land troops before reinforcements arrived. By dawn, Harrow 7 would become a forward base, and the colony corridor would be open. Inside the station, Jonah followed every movement on the old glass map. Escorts moved in pairs. Destroyers stayed near larger hulls. The flagship remained protected in the center. Bram frowned. "They are taking the old convoy lanes." "That is where the old ship wanted them," Jonah said. Bram glanced at him. "You think Mercy Forge warned us?" "I think the engineers who built this moon planned for a night like this." Harrow 7 had never been only storage. Decades earlier, engineers buried hardline cables under the surface. Many ships could no longer fly. Their bridges were empty. Their engines were cold. But some still had reserve cores, manual cannon systems, and enough life left for one final duty. "How many ships can answer?" Jonah asked. 90 maybe, Bram said. "More if the East Line survives. Warm them slowly. If I push too much power, the Draal will see the heat. Then do not push. Let the moon breathe." Bram opened the first reserve feed by hand. Far out in the crater field, Mercy Forge warmed by 2 degrees. Then Lantern Wake answered. Then Iron Psalm. Then Resolute Harbor. The Draal kept moving deeper, trusting the dead human ships to shield them. And on Harrow 7, every silent hull had waited for that exact hour in silence. At 2:37 a.m., the first Draal escort passed above Mercy Forge. A thin white line appeared on Kessa's firing board. "Commander," she said, "Mercy Forge has an angle." Bram checked the warning. "One shot, maybe. The mount will not survive another." Jonah looked at the alien flagship. Its forward weapon had begun to charge. "One shot can be enough," he said. "Old steel still knows its duty." At first, Sarek thought it was a sensor error. One of the dead human ships had moved. Dust poured from Mercy Forge. Ice broke along the barrel. The old gun lifted toward the Draal escort above it. On the Ashkared, Rill leaned toward his console. "Commander, movement from a surface hull." Sarek turned slowly. "The station." "No, one of the dead ships." For the first time since entering orbit, the Draal bridge went quiet. Inside the station, Kessa's hand hovered over the firing lever. "Engines only," Jonah said. "Stop the ship. Do not break it open." Kessa drew one breath. Then she pulled the lever. Mercy Forge fired. The shot thundered through the crater field, throwing dust from the old battleship's hull. The cannon kicked backward, tearing part of its mount loose. But the round crossed the dark lane and struck the Draal escort beneath its engine spine. The alien ship lurched sideways. Its engines died. It spun away, helpless but still whole. Sarek gripped the command rail. "Burn that hull." Draal plasma struck Mercy Forge. Armor split. A tower collapsed. Red fire crawled across its dead deck. Bram looked down at his gauges. "Mercy Forge is gone." Jonah kept his face still. "She did what she woke to do." Then another firing line appeared. Across Harrow-Minus 7, the graveyard began to move. Old cannons turned under dust. Ammunition rails unlocked. Mechanical sights aligned by cable, gear, and pressure. The ships did not wake like modern vessels. They woke roughly, piece by piece. Sarek saw the trap too late. "Climb out," he ordered. His ships tried. The moon caught them. Magnetic anchors burst from buried ports, wrapping damaged Draal vessels in heavy cables. They dragged them down, keeping them inside the firing lanes. Draal ships fired in every direction. Plasma hit empty hulls, crater walls, and broken towers. Some shots scattered into dust. Others forced alien ships into worse positions. Kessa called from the board. 3 destroyers turning toward the ridge. Jonah pointed to the northern crater. "Move Harbor Saint." Bram pulled a heavy lever. An old carrier shifted on buried rails, placing its ruined body between the station and the Draal guns. Jonah read the faded name across the broken hull. "She has taken worse for better people." Outside, the Draal advance had stopped. The dead fleet had closed around them. Sarek still had one weapon that mattered, the Ashkared. His escorts were disabled. His destroyers were trapped between dead human hulls. His rear formation had collapsed. But the flagship still had power, and its main cannon was charging again. Rill looked at the firing path and stiffened. "Commander, several of our own ships are below that line." "They were ordered to clear it," Sarek said. "They cannot move." Sarek kept his eyes on the station. The station dies. The moon falls. In the command room, alarms changed tone. Kessa checked the impact board. Main cannon locked on the ridge. Bram's voice was flat. "We cannot shield that." Jonah studied the old map. Every working cannon could fire into the Ashkared's core. The flagship would vanish and few people would question the decision. The Draal had invaded. They had aimed at colonies. They had fired first. But Jonah knew victory could rot if a man fed it revenge. "Bring up the chapel ships," he said. Bram looked at him quickly. "Those guns are barely holding together. Can they fire once? If the lines survive the power load, then once is what we ask of them." The chapel ships were the oldest hulls on Harrow-Minus 7. Gray Chapel, Red Pilgrim, and Stone Vesper. They were too damaged to restore and too respected to melt down. Their weapons were crude beside modern plasma batteries. Draal shields could bend energy and confuse guided missiles. They were not made for old human mass rounds fired from buried guns at close range. Bram fed power into the chapel lines. The room lights flickered. Something cracked behind the wall and spat sparks. Kessa held the firing sequence together. On the screen, Ashkared's main cannon glowed brighter. Then Sarek's image appeared. "Old commander, your cemetery has delayed us. It will not save you." Jonah looked at the screen for 1 second, then turned away. Instead, he turned the steel key one final step. Across Harrow-7, 3 buried battleships opened their main gun doors. The sound rolled through the moon like stone grinding under time. Rill saw the targeting lines. "They are not aiming at the bridge." Sarek leaned forward. "Where then?" The chapel ships fired. 3 heavy rounds crossed the graveyard from separate angles. The first smashed into Ashkarad's main cannon mount. The second punched through the shield control spine. The third buried itself beneath the engine ring and locked the drive assembly solid. The flagship shook. Its main cannon died before firing. Its shields vanished. Its engines froze. Ashkarad hung above Harrow-7, trapped and powerless among ships it had mistaken for scrap. Kessa slowly released the firing board. "We have them." Bram's face was pale. One more volley would end it. Jonah felt every eye in the room turn toward him. They were waiting for rage, for punishment, for the order that would make the helpless flagship disappear. He gave them something harder. Jonah watched the helpless flagship drift. "Our duty was to stop the weapon," he said. "The weapon is stopped." Nobody spoke after that. Outside, hundreds of old cannons remained aimed at the Draal fleet. The battle was won. What came next would decide what kind of people had won it. For 8 minutes, nothing fired. The Draal ships drifted between the human battleships, damaged and surrounded. Some leaked air. Some had lost engines. Others were pinned by magnetic cables, their crews trapped inside dark compartments, waiting for the final blow. It never came. Jonah opened a channel. "This is Commander Jonah Ward of Harrow-7. Your weapons are disabled. Your fleet is contained. Power down remaining batteries and you will receive safe corridors. Medical aid will be provided. Escape pods will pass without fire. Prisoners will be treated with order." On the Ashkarad, Rill listened in disbelief. Sarek's jaw tightened. "A trick." From below the bridge, a wounded officer spoke through static. "Commander, Section 6 and 8 are losing air. We have injured crew." Sarek said nothing. Jonah knew that silence. Pride could hold a man upright even while the floor burned beneath him. Some commanders would let their own people die rather than accept mercy from someone they had planned to destroy. So Jonah did not wait for Sarek. "Kessa, open lane 3. 2 old battleships lowered their cannons. Bram released the magnetic anchor from a damaged Draal escort. Blue guide lights appeared across the moon's surface, marking a narrow path through the graveyard. Dr. Havid led the first rescue crew himself. Kessa watched the feed. "They came here to take the moon," Jonah nodded, "and they failed. They would not have done this for us." "Maybe not." "Then why should we?" Jonah looked out at the old ships in the dust. "Because if we only copy our enemies, they have already changed us." One by one, the Draal ships powered down. Nobody cheered. Nobody mocked the defeated. The victory was too heavy for that. At last, Ashkarad lowered its final weapon. Rill sent the surrender code. Sarek remained silent on the bridge of his crippled flagship. By dawn, Harrow-7 looked less like a battlefield and more like an old harbor after a storm. Bram joined Jonah at the observation glass. "Grey Chapel's gun is ruined," he said. "Stone Vesper cracked her barrel. Mercy Forge will never answer again." Jonah looked across the crater fields where sunlight touched the burned armor. They answered when they were needed. Kessa came to stand beside them. "Do you think the Draal will return?" Jonah watched wounded alien crewmen being escorted through the Mercy corridor. "They will remember this moon before they decide." Weeks later, the story of Harrow-7 traveled across human space. In later years, Jonah would say the graveyard won because it was old, but also because it was patient. Age had not made the fleet harmless. It had made the fleet disciplined. The Draal had entered a graveyard believing old ships were harmless relics. They found buried engineering, patient strategy, and an old commander who understood the line between defense and revenge. For older captains, the lesson was clear. Machines grow old, uniforms fade, but duty can remain awake long after the galaxy stops listening. A fleet can win with weapons. A civilization survives by knowing when to stop. Jonah refused metals. Bram repaired every cable that could still carry current. Kessa placed Mercy Forge's first warning light behind glass. Dr. Havid recorded every wounded name, human and Draal alike. When 2:30 a.m. came again, Harrow-7 returned to silence. The dead ships rested beneath the stars. Their crews were gone. Their engines were cold. Their names were old. But along the moon's dark craters, their cannons still faced the sky. And every pilot who crossed that border learned the warning carved above the station door. Some ships are not waiting to be remembered. Some ships are waiting to be needed. Subscribe.